Okay, welcome back. It's 5/17 of 2015. We're going to continue with Paul Ricoeur's comments on the creation narrative. And we especially get a chance to look this time at his doctrine of the continuance of creation and how we participate in the continuance of creation. So it's very central to his idea of the doctrine of selfhood. So continuance really is compatible with his position and emphasizes the central doctrine of his position, which is always, for Ricoeur, the doctrine of selfhood. We'll look at the three moments, which are going to be concept, paradox, and retracing. And we will begin with concept. And basically, Ricoeur tells us that continuance all begins with the birth of the concept of faithfulness. There's an exhortation to participate in a three-part promise: the universality of an ordered creation, the implantment of responsibility on the part of humanity, and the reflexive moment of actualizing that responsibility in an actual mission. There has been a promise in the event that the originary inauguration of creation will continue through the grace of God the Creator. So that's the starting point, this concept of the faithfulness of God that sustains and continues creation toward its eschatological end of the perfection of selfhood. But then it passes through a paradox for Ricoeur. And the paradox has four aspects. Number one, the entire idea is ungraspable conceptually. The beginning of creation is always a place that cannot be grasped in any conceptual way. We always begin at the midst of our historical situation. We regain the origin, Ricoeur says, in a retrospective way from the midst of our historical existence. There's a force, an inaugural force, that perpetuates the originary energia of creation. And continuance attests to the beginning through this energia force. And so through the retracing of that force of the energia of creation that we can rejoin the originary event. But the paradox is that even though this is our task, it's a task which is conceptually impossible to reach as a true originary place. So that's the paradox, is that we have a task, a promise, and a concept that cannot really be fully conceptualized. That leads us to the key moment here in continuance. Ricoeur is all about discussing retracing, and so the entire section is dedicated to the third moment of retracing. It's retracing origin from the unlocatable beginning. It begins with horizon. We take up a reflexive retracing of the intended horizon of creation, that energy of an intended horizon. It's an eschatology. We complete our retracing with an opposite-directed eschatological outlook. We retrace the historical birth of Israel. We retrace the psychic birth of the human condition. And we synthesize together the mythic point of view and the scientific point of view. We kind of take up that attitude of Genesis 2 and 3. We unite the mythic and the scientific. Our reference is going to be what Ricoeur calls, and this is where he starts to really make his shift in perspective to really letting us know that this is the Ricoeur perspective. We reference the objective projected schemas in the creation narrative. Their objective, these projections, are the already there presence of the origin in history. Subject becomes decentered as the positings that are referenced in the creation narratives take on a life of their own. They take on an objective reality of their own. So narratives are recognized as containing posited foundational events. And these posited foundational events for Ricoeur are to be understood as schematized representations of origin. That's the key. We read the creation narrative and we find schematized representations of origin. So we always start, according to Ricoeur, in a language of talking about origin at the dialogue threshold. And so a key concept is universality. The origin, as always having been an existing recounted origin of universality. These narratives have always contained this universal account of origin events as representative schemas, and so it's a universality that has always been there in the narrative in objective history. So we engage this history, these schemas, at the dialogue threshold, and we enlist two resources when we gather there in dialogue with others: the recounted universality of origin in the narratives, and we also take our own phonetic individual experience and our own phonetic intentionality of our stance at this dialogue threshold. Now, charisma depicts the type of speech that takes place at the dialogue threshold. It always has a charismatic aspect of proclamation. Now, the critique for this dialogue of retracing is, number one, it's a refining process. Narrative becomes progressively more refined as a model of the originary creation. Our motivational base that we carry to the dialogue threshold is a motivational base of attestation concerning origin. It always guides our constructed projection of origin. There's always a multiplicity of narratives at the dialogue threshold in these objective narrative accounts and in the accounts that others bring to the dialogue. It's a process of demythologizing. That's the methodology. And we are headed toward a vanishing point. We are to progressively purge the creation narratives and eventually reach a vanishing point of purified confession of faith. For Ricoeur, our retracing at the dialogue threshold is always tensioned. It's always tensioned between what we've already mentioned before, the charismatic aspect of our dialogue as a originary creation narrative that always asks to be spoken, but then the fact that we cannot really grasp it completely in a conceptual way, so it's ungraspable, and yet at the same time it asks to be spoken. That's the tension, the key tension. It presents the modalities of the cosmic, the political, and the juridical. We do have the problem of contingency, Ricoeur says, and that's that we live in a reality that promotes mathematical models of reality that are fallible. And we have the also posited arrogance of a sovereignty of subject concerning meaning. So we need to promote ideas of the irreducibility of reality, even to a mathematical model, and we need to promote the idea of the negation of hubris in all instances. Ricoeur says, therefore, our retracing is a redefinition of order. Creation is understood as an eschatological efficacious word that calls forth, that orders existence, and that brings into existence this ordered eschatological end of the Creator. It's a work in progress. It's a work in process. It still currently is confronting injustice, which is eschatologically going to be overcome. So retracing is all about an eschatological process of referencing these objective projected schemas in the creation narrative, and then engaging in dialogue at the dialogue threshold and refining those schemas, and at the same time paying attention to our motivational base of attestation and refining our own motivational base of attestation, and then engaging in that methodology of demythologizing the creation narratives so we can reach a purged, pure creation narrative that better represents the originary event. But it's always tensioned in an impossibility of not being able to be really expressed conceptually. Although it wants to be spoken, it wants to become charismatic event. It wants this charismatic aspect emphasized, but at the same time, we can't, in a entirely perfected way, ever reach that conceptualization. It's always an eschatological task. It's never an accomplished task. It's always, always, always open to revision. That's the key here. That concept remains open to revision. So when we return to concept after this third moment of retracing, we return to an open concept that asks for revision and eschatological perfection. So it's always a return to the open concept. And then enters through that paradox, again, of the fact that it is ungraspable, yet asked to be spoken. And where does it take us? Right back to the dialogue threshold of retracing and purging the schematizations that are present in creation narrative. And we will work on those schemas in a dialogical and dialectical way, in dialogue with others at the dialogue threshold. And it's all through the dialogue threshold that Ricoeur wants us to understand his position on creation. It's a position of emphasizing, number one, the human condition of selfhood. And it's a position of emphasizing, number two, the fact that it is fundamentally a starting point for us of continuance, because we always begin from our situation in our historical environment, our own present historical situation with our own frenetic stance and our own motivational base of attestation and conviction. We always begin there, so it's always a beginning in the environment of continuance. So the fundamental starting point is continuance, and then we retrace origin from continuance. But continuance has a current presence that presents itself to us of schemas in narrative and energia in objective reality. The thrust of horizon, the intentional thrust of horizon, is an energia that is present in our objective reality. So we have the energia and we have schema that both are present for us as resources that become topics of dialogue at the dialogue threshold with others. And we engage at that dialogue in a variety of venues. Obviously, if you are a member of the Christian faith, that dialogue is going to take place in Christian fellowship and in Christian study, and the reciprocal exchange of ideas and dialogue with the Koinonia fellowship. But you will confront together the energia of the thrust of the horizon, of the intentionality of creation that is present in creation now as a spiritual backdrop. You will also confront the schematizations present in creation narrative. So very, very